Now, the BBC News at 10 with Sophie Rayworth.
Shock as Boris Johnson, the man tipped to be the next Prime Minister, dramatically withdraws from the leadership race. As he left home this morning, it was thought he was about to launch his bid, but then this.
Having consulted colleagues and in view of the circumstances in Parliament, I have concluded that person cannot be me.
The reason for the abrupt change? His hopes were dealt a fatal blow by his Leave campaign ally, Michael Gove, who's decided to run himself.
While Boris has great attributes, he was not capable of uniting that team and leading the party in the country in the way that I would have hoped.
Also hoping to be Prime Minister is Theresa May, who says she offers strong leadership and warns that politics is not a game.
My pitch is very simple. I'm Theresa May and I think I'm the best person to be Prime Minister of this country.
We'll be looking at what went wrong for Boris Johnson and what it all means for the Conservative Party. Also tonight, the Governor of the Bank of England hints that interest rates could be cut even further following Britain's decision to leave the EU.
Are you going to stand for the leadership?
But Angela Eagle changed her mind today too, deciding to delay her bid to replace Jeremy Corbyn.
Here in northern France, we report on 2 days of commemoration for the 1 million men killed and injured in the Battle of the Somme, which started a century ago. At the Thiepval Memorial and in every part of the United Kingdom, vigils are being held. They'll continue throughout the night until that moment a century ago when the battle started. And we consider the fate of thousands of Welsh volunteer troops who suffered huge losses in the deadly battle for Mametz Wood in the early days of the Battle of the Somme.
Many of them didn't get within 200 yards of the wood itself. It was a huge trial by fire for the division.
Later in the hour, we'll have Sports Day on the BBC News channel with all the latest reports, results, interviews and features from the BBC Sports Centre.
Good evening. Boris Johnson's dreams of becoming the next Conservative leader and Prime Minister have been shattered in a day of extraordinary drama and political coups. Just hours before the former Mayor of London was expected to declare he was running, his Leave campaign ally, Michael Gove, stepped in and stunned Westminster by announcing he'd decided to run for leader himself. In the midst of it all, the Home Secretary, Theresa May, who campaigned to stay in the EU, announced she would also be standing. Our political editor, Laura Kunsberg, reports.
Waiting, waiting and waiting. Even some of Boris Johnson's closest friends and supporters didn't know what they were waiting for was this. Only his wife and a couple of confidants knew what was coming next.
I must tell you, my friends, you who have waited faithfully for the punchline of this speech, that having consulted colleagues and in view of the circumstances in Parliament, I have concluded that person cannot be me.
The blonde dropped a bombshell, leaving the race. Because his campaign chief, Michael Gove, had phoned the strategist Linton Crosby this morning, quitting and saying he would run instead. For Mr Johnson's supporters, tears and disbelief.
You look absolutely devastated.
Yeah, well, worked with him for 10 years in London. I know his quality. I stand by everything I said about him. Obviously, the circumstances over the last couple of days have been very, very turbulent, caught a lot of us by surprise.
Did you know he was going to do that?
No, I had absolutely no idea. It was a total surprise to me.
In 24 hours, friends have turned bitter foes. They fought and won the referendum together. Now Michael Gove isn't just withdrawing his support, but saying he wants to be Prime Minister instead. Although he has always denied having that ambition.
The one thing I do know is that, having seen David Cameron up close, I know that it takes extraordinary reserves of patience, of judgment, of character to lead this country, and he has it, and I don't.
So what on earth has made Michael Gove completely change his view.
But during the course of the last few days, I've realised that while Boris does have those very special abilities to communicate and to reach out, what he did not have was the capacity to build and to lead that team and to provide the leadership the country needs at this critical moment.
You know, you have worked closely with Boris Johnson for the last few months during the referendum campaign, and you've known the man for decades. So people will think it is rather surprising that suddenly you're saying, well, just in the last couple of days, it's occurred to me that he's not quite up to it.
In the last 4 days, I had a chance to see up close and personal how Boris dealt with some of the decisions that we needed to make in order to take this country forward. And during that period, I had hoped that Boris would rise to the occasion, because inevitably, when you have a leadership election, people are tested, questions are asked of them, tests are set. As I say, Boris has formidable qualities, but I saw him seek to meet and not pass those tests.
Your colleagues this morning are astonished, some of them, by what you have done. How do you expect anybody in the Conservative Party, let alone members of the public, to be able to trust you?
Well, people will know that throughout my time in politics, I've always done what I believed to be right. And sometimes that's been at the cost of friendships, sometimes it's cost me in terms of personal relationships.
Whether it's treachery or tragedy, the Home Secretary's smooth calm puts her as front runner. Her launch was packed with MPs and ministers, ready to support her promises to cut immigration and provide stability at a time of crisis.
My pitch is very simple. I'm Theresa May, and I think I'm the best person to be Prime Minister of this country. If ever there was a time for a Prime Minister who is ready and able to do the job from day one, this is it. We have immediate work to do to restore political stability and economic certainty, to bring together the party and the country, and to negotiate a sensible and orderly departure from the European Union. And I know I'm not a showy politician. I don't tour the television studios. I don't gossip about people over lunch. I don't go drinking in Parliament's bars. I don't often wear my heart on my sleeve. I just get on with the job in front of me. Under my leadership, the motives of the Conservative Party will never be in any doubt, and our actions will be bold. We, the Conservatives, will put ourselves at the service of ordinary working people. We will strive to make Britain a country that works for everyone, regardless of who they are and regardless of where they're from. Now, I know there's a great hunger for this kind of one nation vision in the Conservative Party.
You were on the losing side of the European argument. What is it now that you think makes you a winner?
I think what the public want is strong, resilient leadership, and I think they want honesty from their politicians. And I've always tried to be as clear with people as possible about what the challenges are and the difficulties in facing those and how we can do that together. And I think that is what people are looking for.
But this race for number 10 may yet find surprising stars. The referendum gave a big platform to outer Andrea Leadsom, who's now said she will run.
I have a real heart for this. You know, this is something I really long to do, so I'm hoping. But at the end of the day, it's up to the party and then it's up to the country.
The former Defence Secretary Liam Fox, on the right of the Tory party, is taking another shot.
This is about the governance of our country. It's about the future of our relationships with Europe and the world beyond.
Boris, what do you want to say to Michael Gove? What do you want to say to Michael Gove?
It's an undignified departure from the race, from a politician who pleases crowds but alarms some others. Not even a week since his biggest victory, Boris Johnson's battle to become Prime Minister is lost before it officially began. Laura Kunsberg, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, Michael Gove was by no means the only Conservative to round on Boris Johnson today. Lord Heseltine launched a scathing attack on him, saying he'd created the greatest constitutional crisis in modern times and would have to live with the shame of what he has done. In just 1 week, Boris Johnson has gone from victory to defeat. James Landell looks at what went wrong for him and what it means for the Conservative Party. His report contains some flash photography.
Boris Johnson was the charismatic face of Leave, campaigning for a cause as energetically as he'd once campaigned for himself. A man of the people who appealed beyond party bounds and tasted victory.
I believe that this Thursday can be our country's Independence Day.
And with the referendum won, many assumed Mr Johnson would stand for the leadership on a joint ticket with Michael Gove. But it was not to be. And there was little sympathy for where the former London mayor had left the country.
I think it's an utterly intolerable situation. I mean, this guy has created the biggest constitutional crisis in peacetime in my lifetime. He's seen a serious depletion in the nation's savings. He's torn the Tory party apart. And he's left the management of the economy in a situation where no politician can answer the basic questions about our direction of travel.
Mr Gove's doubts first emerged in a leaked email from his wife, claiming that Tory members and media moguls like Rupert Murdoch needed reassurance about Mr Johnson. Some MPs claimed an article by Mr Johnson in the Daily Telegraph showed he didn't have the determination to deliver Brexit. And one MP who backed Mr Johnson in the papers today but is now supporting Mr Gove suggested there'd been a row about campaign staff and cabinet jobs.
Putting together a really strong unifying team was an absolute condition, and when that fell away, I think Michael felt actually things have changed.
It looks like a sort of student political game when the country needs direction, needs clarity, needs a sense of maturity. I am shocked and surprised that people should behave in this way.
Many MPs believe that Mr Gove pulled out primarily because he did not believe Mr Johnson could win, that his heart wasn't really in this race. But Mr Johnson's supporters say this was not some last-minute change of mind, but a deliberate, planned political assassination. Today, Mr Johnson quoted Shakespeare, appearing to compare Mr Gove's betrayal to Brutus's assassination of Caesar, saying it was
a time not to fight against the tide of history, but to take that tide at the flood and sail on to fortune.
For years, Boris Johnson has entertained the nation, but his chance of leading it is now in ruins, and the smiles of the campaign are long gone. The events of today will echo for years to come. James Landell, BBC News, Westminster.
Our political editor Laura Koonsberg is in Westminster. Laura, an astounding day on so many levels, but it is the deeply personal nature of this that has shocked so many people.
That's right, and it completely shocked Boris Johnson and his team, who have been planning, thinking about his leadership hopes, not just for months, but frankly for years. And tonight in Westminster, it feels like there is bitterness and suspicion all around. If we just think about what's happened in the last few months, Michael Gove helped persuade Boris Johnson to campaign to leave the European Union. Mr Johnson's charisma and crowd-pulling abilities helped to win that campaign. So together, by winning, they finished off David Cameron, the Prime Minister. Now today, with his decision, Michael Gove has finished off Boris Johnson's dreams of taking the prize. Right now, it seems that Mr Gove's own chances of becoming Prime Minister are on the slim side. But whatever happens, he will certainly have a place in the political history books. But tonight, it appears that really today's completely tumultuous events help Theresa May, the Home Secretary, very significantly. Her goal today, long thought about, was to appear calm, sober, to convey authority. Frankly, she did that even before she'd opened her mouth, because in comparison to what was going on with the other two, she looked like she was completely in control. And I can tell you tonight, 2 more cabinet ministers have declared their backing for the Home Secretary. Michael Fallon, the Defence Secretary, and Patrick McLaughlin, the Transport Secretary, have both made public their intentions to back Theresa May to be not just the next leader of the Tory party, but of course the next Prime Minister. She also tonight will have the support of her first newspaper, with the Daily Mail declaring tomorrow that they will back her to move into number 10. There's no question right now that she has moved way out in front as the front runner in this race. But Sophie, just think, it was only just a week ago that the ballot boxes had been sealed up, that the polls had closed in the referendum campaign. Just think how much and how quickly things have changed right across politics since then. Leadership races are always unpredictable. This one, only a couple of days in, is something else.
Indeed. Laura, thank you. And you can find out more about all the candidates, where they stand on issues and how the leadership process works on our website. That's at bbc.co.uk/news. In an unexpected move, the Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, has signalled that interest rates could be cut over the summer. He warned that economic growth could be hit for some time following the vote to leave the EU. Mr. Carney said more cash might also need to be pumped into the economy. Here's our business editor, Simon Jack.
As the Vote Leave campaign punched the air in victory last week, the market hit the floor. £1.8 trillion was wiped off shares worldwide in a single day. The city and the country seemed rudderless. The Bank of England had described a Brexit as the biggest risk to the economy, and the Governor hadn't changed his tune today.
In my view, and I'm not prejudging the views of other independent members of the MPC, the economic outlook has deteriorated, and some monetary policy easing will likely be required over the summer.
That could mean lower interest rates, more money printing, or both to deal with a new economic reality.
The material slowing in growth that the MPC had identified as a risk associated with the referendum now looks likely to be our central forecast.
But however calm he seemed, he warned there was, in his words, an uncomfortable truth.
There are limits to what the Bank of England can do. The future potential of this economy and its implications for jobs, real wages and wealth are not the gifts of monetary policymakers.
So what about that real economy? At this software firm, there are already signs of caution.
One thing that we have noticed is 4 potential contracts we had in our pipeline have pulled back. These are international clients who are looking at investing in the UK. Until we know if Britain is in the single market or not, there's going to be a period of uncertainty, and that period of uncertainty is unsettling for people looking to invest in the UK, for jobs and for new business in the UK.
Some of the biggest losers this week have been banks. HSBC and JP Morgan have warned jobs in the UK could go to Europe. But today, the Barclays chief told the BBC that UK jobs were not under threat.
No, we want to be involved in the capital markets globally. Right now, the best way to do that is to be anchored in London and anchored in New York as we are. You might have to increase your presence in another location. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to decrease your location here.
Do you predict a recession?
I think it's way too early to tell. I think what we need to focus on is this is a political crisis today. It's not an economic crisis. This is very, very different than what happened in 2008.
In the city, some financial markets have roared back, helped in part by the Governor's hint of an imminent interest rate cut. It is still very early days in the post-Brexit journey, but today the Bank of England made it clear it thinks the sky has darkened over the UK economy.
And Simon is here. How reassured were markets by what Mark Carney had to say?
I think they definitely did take some reassurance from that. You know, he's not everyone's cup of tea. Some politicians think he's been too political by half, you know, during the run-up to this and after the referendum. But they have taken reassurance from someone they see as perhaps one of the last grown-ups left in the house at the moment, you know, running the show. And they've taken reassurance for 2 reasons. One, markets love an interest rate cut. It encourages people to borrow, to spend. It's good for the economy. It's good for companies. And he hinted at that today. Might come over the summer. Could be as early as July the 14th. And the other thing is that while we wait for this incredible political tale to unravel, as Laura was talking about there, what he's saying is I'm not waiting for that, for an answer to that. I'm going to get on the front foot. He had this press conference today, a very unusual one. He had the bank chiefs like Jez Staley from Barclays in yesterday. He wants to get them all round out, get the wagons circled to say, look, I'm on the front foot. I am a man with a plan. But as he said in that piece there, he is not Superman. He can't do everything. The final settlement will not fall to people like him, to monetary policy, it will fall to the politicians. And so he's saying, you know, I can do only so much, but I'll throw some cushions down in case there are any accidents along the way.
Our business editor, Simon Jack, thank you. The government has decided to postpone a decision on airport expansion in the southeast of England until a new Prime Minister is in place. An announcement on projects at Heathrow or Gatwick had been expected in the coming weeks. Business leaders have criticised the move, saying airport capacity is now an even greater priority following the UK's decision to leave the EU. Now, the Conservatives aren't the only ones dealing with a leadership battle. The former Shadow Business Secretary, Angela Eagle, was expected to launch her bid to replace Jeremy Corbyn today, but instead she delayed it. Mr Corbyn has lost the confidence of 80% of his MPs, but he has the support of many grassroots members of the party and is refusing to step down. Our Deputy Political Editor John Pienaar reports.
Where's everybody gone? Jeremy Corbyn's home is normally mobbed by the media. Today, as rival cabinet ministers jostled and bumped each other off in the power struggle for Britain, he set off for work in peace. But the peace didn't last. It never does. Launching a plan to stamp out racism in the party, he offended critics, including the chief rabbi, by mentioning Israel and the so-called Islamic State in the same breath.
Our Jewish friends are no more responsible for the actions of Israel or the Netanyahu government than our Muslim friends are for those various self-styled Islamic states or organisations.
And was this hard-left prejudice? A pro-Corbyn activist who'd handed out a statement saying rebel MPs should be sacked as candidates turned on a Jewish MP for what he called collusion with the press.
So you can see who's working hand in hand.
Oh, please.
I'm pleased that...
How dare you? How dare you? Absolute dare you?
The MP, Ruth Smeeth, walked out in disgust. It wasn't going well, and under enormous pressure to stand down, facing an imminent leadership challenge, he tried defiance.
I am the leader of the party, and I'm doing that.
What do you say to those many members and most of your MPs who will never follow your leadership, no matter what you say on this or any other subject? And is the breakup of the Labour Party a price worth paying for your continued leadership?
I'm sorry, John, I am going to cut in because there will be plenty of time in the months ahead to debate the Labour leadership.
Mr Corbyn made a message to the Labour Party. No more questions like that. He headed back to Westminster, where his MPs are competing to see who might challenge him for leader.
Mr Corbyn, is the breakup of your party a price worth paying?
And where once loyal MPs are telling me privately they think he should stand down too, to prevent a right-wing takeover. So why is he hanging on so hard? Jeremy Corbyn's left-wing faith goes back decades, anti-capitalist and no compromise. New members helped elect him with far-left backing, all hostile to most Labour MPs and, in some parts of the country, like Oldham, angry about the attempted coup.
It's too early and he's not been given a chance to perform, and he's got tremendous support at the grassroots level. I mean, I didn't vote for him last time, but rest assured, if there is a leadership election, I'll be voting for him this time.
She won't. Angela Eagle, a former shadow cabinet minister, ready to challenge for leader, assuming he doesn't quit first.
The thing is that Jeremy needs to stand down. He's been asked to stand down, and at the moment we want him to consider his position and do what is right in the interests of the party. So over to you, Jeremy.
And if he stays, Owen Smith, another one who quit the top team, fancies a challenge too. And they're holding back to decide which one has the best chance of beating Jeremy Corbyn. And there's another reason a challenge has been put on hold. Many MPs are becoming convinced that Jeremy Corbyn's determination to fight on may be weakening under pressure. This morning, more than 500 Labour councillors joined the chorus calling for him to go. There's talk of his trade union support softening. Formerly loyal MPs are peeling off. Team Corbyn deny that he'll cave in, and they say his base of support is strong enough to see off all comers. It's become a trial of will. The Labour leader is under siege. John Pienaar, BBC News, Westminster.
Britain is sending another 250 military personnel to Iraq, almost doubling the number of UK forces in the country. The troops will join nearly 300 already there, helping to train Iraqi and Kurdish forces in their fight against so-called Islamic State. They'll be based in the Sunni heartland of Anbar province, about 100 miles west of Baghdad. The US military has ended its ban with immediate effect on transgender individuals serving openly in the armed forces. The Defence Secretary, Ash Carter, said he wanted to remove barriers to serving that were unrelated to people's abilities or qualifications. It's thought there are about 4,000 transgender individuals already in the US military. Tomorrow is the centenary of the Battle of the Somme, one of the bloodiest of World War I. On the first day alone, almost 20,000 British soldiers died. Vigils are being held tonight across the UK and in northern France, and Hugh is there now.
Sophie, thanks. Yes, 100 years ago tonight,
Tens of thousands of British and French troops were waiting in this part of northern France to launch a colossal offensive against the German lines. It was meant to be a decisive push, but the Battle of the Somme would last from the 1st of July to the 18th of November 1916, as you say, one of the bloodiest confrontations in the history of the British Armed Forces. And this memorial at Thiepval, the focus of these centenary commemorations, bears the name of 72,000 men, the missing of the Somme, those whose bodies were never found. And tonight's vigils here in France and back home in the UK were arranged to mark those fateful events of a century ago, as Nicholas Witchell reports.
On a summer's evening at the Abbey Church at Westminster, the Queen joined a congregation gathered by the grave of the unknown warrior to remember those who on this night 100 years ago were in their trenches, waiting for dawn on the Somme.
Tonight, we shall remember the courage and the sacrifice of those preparing to face their enemy. And we shall pray that we may continue to learn the lessons of history, to build a world at peace.
The battle took men from virtually every part of the British Isles and the British Empire, from the PALS battalions, some of which were all but wiped out, and from Ireland, north and south. The Bishop of London recalled words written by Tom Kettle, a Dubliner, a soldier and a poet.
Used with the wisdom that is sown in tears and blood, this tragedy of Europe may be and must be the prologue to the two reconciliations of which all statesmen have dreamed.
At the Thiepval Memorial, close to the battlefield, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge and Prince Harry had come to pay their respects and to recall the loss of so many.
We lost the flower of a generation, and in the years to come, it sometimes seemed that with them, a sense of vital optimism had disappeared forever from British life. It was, in many ways, the saddest day in the long story of our nation.
100 years after that day, the nation is remembering. Vigils were mounted at Edinburgh Castle. In Northern Ireland, where the terrible losses of the 36th Ulster Division at the Somme are still remembered, and at Llandaff Cathedral in Cardiff. At Westminster Abbey, today's young servicemen and women took their places at the grave of the unknown warrior to the sound of a single bugle carried by a soldier at the Somme. The vigil will continue throughout the night, in memory of so many who are waiting to go into battle and to meet their destiny. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
Well, some of the names on this British memorial at Thiepval belong to the 38th Welsh Division, a volunteer force which suffered some of the heaviest losses in those first days of July 1916, when they were ordered to drive German forces out of Mametz Wood, which is just a few miles away from here. Some 4,000 men were killed or injured, and some of the men who took part described their experiences in BBC interviews recorded back in the 1980s, when a new memorial was installed opposite Mametz Wood. A red dragon in the heart of Picardy, standing guard over Mametz Wood. Today, it's a very tranquil place, a place to reflect on the brutality of a century ago, when this entire forest was destroyed as a volunteer Welsh army faced the might of one of Germany's best fighting forces.
When the order came about 4:45, number one wave, over. It was synchronised along with the NCOs responsible, and over I went in the first wave.
Officers would say to attack, then he'd shove him back a bit further. Oh, I can't describe it. It was, you know, I don't want to describe it. We're going to travel 200-300 yards of open ground in front of a heavy machine gun fire from both flanks as well as front of you.
And yes, they paid a very heavy price. The little cemeteries dotted around the Somme, looked after by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, are constant reminders. Among those lost at Mametz, two brothers from the Rhondda Valley, Henry and Thomas Hardwich, who died in each other's arms.
They suffered a terrible fate on the 7th of July. Machine guns from the wood itself and from the side from flat iron cops really decimated the attacking soldiers. Many of them didn't get within 200 yards of the wood itself. It was a huge trial by fire for the division.
Throughout the year, there is a constant stream of visitors to Mametz, many descendants of those who fought, little tributes left around the wood. This is the Bond family.
Well, I think we all feel very moved by what happened in the First World War. And we never knew our grandfather, but I think we're quite, we were quite moved by what happened to him, and we want to be where he was killed.
Their grandfather was Major Charles Bond, who recruited thousands of young men in North Wales, many of whom lost their lives on the Somme, and their memory is still honoured by local people.
These Welshmen died for us. They died so that France could be free, so that Mametz could remain a little French village. We are 178 residents, so 3,000 lost their lives for 178 of us. So we can't forget how special this relationship is.
The First World War devastated communities throughout the United Kingdom. But for Wales, this is the spot, and this is the memorial that symbolises the extent of that loss. And the inscription is very simple. Parchwn eu hymdrechion, let us respect their efforts. Parhaid ein hatgofion, let us always remember. Mametz Wood is still the resting place of many who fell in July 1916. Their bodies were never found, but a century later, their sacrifice is not forgotten. Well, early tomorrow morning, the overnight vigils will come to an end, and 0 hour will be marked, the moment the whistles blew and the men were sent over the top on the first day of the Battle of the Somme. We'll have more from Tiepval on BBC One at 7 o'clock in the morning, but for now, from the plains of Picardy in northern France, it's back to Sophie in the studio.
Hugh, thank you. Andy Murray is safely through to the third round at Wimbledon. The world number 2 swept aside Yen Xun Liu in straight sets. And there was a surprise win for fellow Brit Dan Evans. He'll play 7-time champion Roger Federer after a straight sets victory over 30th seed Alexander Dolgopolov. Let's go back now to our main story and the extraordinary events in the race to become the new leader of the Conservative Party and the next Prime Minister. Our home editor Mark Easton has spent the day at the Royal Norfolk Show, gauging reaction from the Tory party faithful.
The race is underway, and the Royal Norfolk Show, where these piglets are competing, is perhaps the epitome of the Tory heartlands, where party members will choose their future leader and the destiny of the nation. You may have heard that Boris Johnson dropped out.
Has he?
Yeah.
No.
Really? Do you not know?
No. I'm delighted to hear that. Yes.
Are you?
Yes, I am actually. I think he's a very intelligent, capable person, but not to run our country.
Where would your vote go?
I'll go to Theresa May. She's a very stern, determined lady, and actually I think she'll probably go quite well in talking to Europeans because of the softer touch. Softer touch with a firm hand.
I think it's a great shame that Boris hasn't stood. He was very prominent in the campaign. He made a good case. It wasn't a case that I supported, actually, but he made a very good case. I think he should have stood up and been counted, and I'm very disappointed he hasn't stood. I've had the good fortune to meet Mr Gove, and I think he would probably get my support. I was very impressed when I met him.
You are going to be one of probably around 150,000 people who are going to be deciding our next Prime Minister. Where does it look like from where you are now?
Well, it looks like Theresa May at the moment, doesn't it? Because I think she's one of the only people that can unite the Conservative Party.
I'm hoping Theresa May will win.
What do you like about Theresa May?
I think she's positive. I think she'll be good over the EU, discussing the points that we need to make to them.
She's a Remainer, though.
Yeah, I know, but I think she's going to be the best.
And what about you, sir?
Well, I think I'll go along with what my wife says.
Always
actually.
wise.
That's absolutely...
Signed up members of the Conservative Party represent just 0.0003% of the total electorate, and yet they will decide the next Prime Minister and, until the general election at least, the shape of post-Brexit Britain. So how do those who haven't paid the 25 quid to become a Conservative Party member feel about the process?
It's not really very democratical, I suppose.
We need to go back and let the people decide who they want for their Prime Minister.
Have a quick general election.
Have a quick general election. Yeah, definitely.
The people in this part of Norfolk voted in almost exactly the same proportions as the country in the referendum, largely Conservatives, divided on Europe and looking for someone who can unite their party and the country. Mark Easton, BBC News, at the Royal Norfolk Show.
Let's get a final word from our political editor, Laura Koonsberg in Westminster. Laura, it's hard to believe that it is only a week since the votes were being counted in the EU referendum. What a week it has been. Where does it all go from here?
Well, Sophie, if I knew that, then I would be in an extremely privileged position. It's worth pondering tonight that Boris Johnson might have won the leadership and might have won the keys to number 10 if he had been willing to stay on and fight. But of course, he'll never know and we'll never know. So the technical process of choosing the next Prime Minister goes forward next week. Right now, there are 5 candidates that will gradually be whittled down to 2 by Tory MPs, and then members around the country will have their say rather than the main members of the public, the normal electorate. It's also worth saying, though, that in terms of those very significant questions after the referendum, how will we reduce immigration and retain close economic ties to the rest of the EU? What will our relationship with our continental neighbours and the rest of the world really look like? In terms of those huge dilemmas, we're not really any further forward in being able to get answers from any of the main contenders on all of that. Theresa May and Michael Gove have both committed firmly to reducing immigration if they win, but we're really not clear what their premierships would look like if either of them to win. And you know, tonight, after an extraordinary day, an extraordinary 7 days and an extraordinarily bitter referendum fight, instead of uniting, the Tories seem to be splintering even further. And politics never loses its ability both to surprise, but also perhaps for many members of the public, its capacity to disappoint too.
Laura Koonsberg, thank you. And that's it from us. Newsnight is underway over on BBC 2, 11 p.m. in Scotland. Here on BBC 1, it's time for the news where you are. Good night.